Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into something a little unusual. Soft candlelight, dusty corridors, and the faint clink of porcelain echoing somewhere behind you. You're standing in an Ottoman palace hallway that smells like warm stone and smoldering agarwood, the kind of scent that clings to your sleeves even when you swear it shouldn't. And honestly, if you were actually here centuries ago, you probably wouldn't survive more than 10 minutes. Between the court politics, the layers of velvet, and the humidity alone, you tap out faster than an overheated laptop. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And go ahead, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you, because I love seeing those little dots on the world map connect. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing there, feeling the coolness of the marble against your bare feet. Yes, you've lost your shoes somewhere between reality and whatever dreamlike space this corridor belongs to. Ahead, the hallway stretches on, swallowed by shadows. You notice the gentle curve of the ceiling, the repeating floral tiles, the way the walls reflect a faint amber glow from lanterns hanging far behind you. As you walk forward, your steps echo just enough to remind you that you're alone, or at least, you hope you're alone. It's hard to tell in a palace this old. History tends to linger like a guest who missed the memo to go home. Somewhere deeper inside, tea is brewing. You can smell it. Earthy, slightly sweet, infused with something smoky and resinous. It isn't the cozy scent you're used to from your grocery store tea bags. This is richer, darker, older. The Ottomans had a way of turning even a simple drink into a ritual woven with symbolism, hierarchy, and the occasional political dagger tucked behind a polite smile. You follow that scent almost instinctively, like your brain recognizes something your body has definitely never experienced before. As you move, you brush your hand along the wall, feeling the ridges of hand-carved stone. You imagine artisans chipping away centuries ago, probably arguing about taxes or who stole whose lunch. Some things never change. The lantern flickers, and for a moment, you swear you see movement at the end of the hall. Not threatening. More like someone just rounded the corner and forgot to invite you. Typical palace hospitality. The air grows warmer, carrying hints of cardamom and orange peel. You're getting close. This is the Hall of Amber, an informal name whispered among palace staff rather than written into any official records. It earned its reputation because every evening, palace attendants burned amber resin in small brass cups to keep the air perfumed. The resin smoke curled upward in lazy spirals, coating the ceiling in a thin golden sheen. People said if you looked up long enough, you could see shapes inside the smoke. Omens, spirits, or just your imagination running wild. Historians are still debating about. Sorry, wrong language. Let's reset that. Historians still debate whether the palace servants genuinely believe those drifting smoke shapes foretold anything, or if they simply used it as an excuse to gossip without getting caught. Because honestly, if you were trapped inside a palace with 1,000 rules and zero privacy, you'd also start assigning mystical importance to random wall stains just to stay entertained. You reach an arched doorway, its wooden frame etched with tulip motifs, the Ottoman equivalent of flexing your artistic tastes. Beyond the arch, the corridor widens into a long hall lined with carved wooden screens. Soft moonlight filters through latticework windows, painting patterned shadows like delicate webs across the floor. You feel the breeze, and it carries a faint chorus of distant murmurs, voices from another room, layered and indistinct, as though wrapped in cloth. You aren't intruding, not exactly. You're drifting through a memory, a place that doesn't mind being revisited. As you walk deeper, you notice small alcoves on either side, each holding a brass incense burner shaped like a blooming pomegranate. Smoke curls upward from one that's still lit, and when you pause next to it, the sweetness of the amber momentarily overwhelms you. It's soft, warm, almost buttery, like the smell of a violin case right after it's been opened. The Ottomans believed scents could shape moods, guide ceremonies, even influence political outcomes. And to be fair, if someone offered you a cup of hot tea in this hallway, surrounded by this aroma, you'd probably agree to anything they asked. Scent is powerful like that. A servant rushes by. Well, rush is generous. He glides past you like someone who has spent a lifetime trying not to make any noise. He doesn't see you, because again, you're not truly here. But you catch the soft rustle of his silks and the tiny jingle of keys or coins at his belt. He seems focused, carrying a silver tray with small porcelain cups. You follow him without thinking, mesmerized by the ease with which he navigates the twisting hall. You turn a corner and suddenly find yourself staring at a door slightly ajar. Warm light spills from inside, making the dust motes dance in the air like tiny floating lanterns. The smell of tea is stronger now, deep, floral, layered with something faintly bitter like dried rose stems. You push the door open just enough to slip inside. The room you enter is long and narrow, lined with shelves filled with jars, hundreds of them, each containing a different tea, herb, resin, or spice. It looks like the pantry of someone who truly believes they can season their way out of any problem. Clay jars with faded paint, glass jars sealed with beeswax, tin containers etched with calligraphy that glints when the lantern flame hits just right. You whisper under your breath, half amused, half awed. This is where the first preparations for the palace's forgotten tea ceremonies began, the ones held long after the sun dipped below the horizon, when politics softened into whispers and footsteps grew cautious. The rituals weren't public, weren't recorded, and technically weren't even supposed to exist, which is probably why they fascinate you so much. One shelf in particular catches your eye. On it sits a small jar with a cracked lid, unremarkable except for a faded symbol painted on its side, a looping tulip shape intertwined with a crescent moon. A rare mark. You run your finger across it, feeling the rough texture. This blend was said to be the first ever brought to the palace from distant trade routes. A tea so precious it was stored separately, guarded almost obsessively. Some say it arrived as a diplomatic gift. Others claim it was smuggled in by merchants who hoped to entice the Sultan with flavors unknown to his court. And, yes, historians still argue about which version is true. As you lift the jar, a faint rattle echoes inside. The leaves, probably dry as antique paper by now, shift softly. You imagine them steeping centuries ago in some ornate golden pot as the aroma filled this very room. You imagine servants whispering outside the door, practicing the sequence of gestures required for serving. You imagine a sultan lifting the cup, the entire hall holding its breath. Then a lantern flickers sharply, snapping you back. You realize your heart is beating just a bit faster, like the room is leaning in, encouraging you to keep going, to discover more. You take a slow breath. The amber smoke, the cool marble, the faint spice in the air, the sense of something forgotten, whispering to be remembered. And with that exhale, you step deeper into the hall, ready for whatever the palace is willing to reveal next. You keep moving, letting the wooden door behind you fall shut with a soft click, like a polite reminder that once you step deeper into this place, the palace won't let you leave easily. The corridor ahead narrows again, guiding you like a funnel towards something warmer, brighter. The scent of tea thickens, richer than before, layered with spices that feel familiar yet impossible to name. It's as if someone brewed nostalgia itself and let it drift through the halls. You follow the warmth until the path opens into a modest chamber lit by a circle of lanterns. The glow is low and honey-colored, the kind that makes everything look softer, dreamier, like a filter gently smoothing out the wrinkles of history. In the center of the room sits a low marble table carved with swirling floral patterns. Around it, for cushions arranged in a perfect square, none out of place, none wrinkled, none looking as though a single ounce of weight has touched them in years. It's ceremonial perfection, the kind that screams, "Don't you dare sit unless someone announces you with a trumpet." But you're not here to follow rules. You're drifting, observing, soaking. In this room, something ancient happened, something involving the first cup of tea served to the palace before evening feasts. This wasn't the grand ceremony. No, that would come later. This was the quiet prelude, the warm-up ritual performed by palace women trained with terrifying precision. You hear movement behind one of the carved wooden screens, soft footsteps, rustling fabrics. Then she appears, a palace attendant dressed in layers of silk, carrying a slender copper kettle whose long spout arcs like a bird's neck. She moves toward the marble table with practiced calm. You notice how her wrists turn gracefully, no wasted motion, the kettle never wobbling even slightly. If you tried carrying hot water like that, you'd probably trip over your own shadow. She kneels, placing the kettle on a small heated brick that radiates a faint glow. You get closer, and the warmth tingles against your skin. She reaches for a lacquered box and lifts the lid, revealing tea leaves curled tightly like tiny sleeping creatures. Their scent drifts toward you, fresh, grassy, with a whisper of something roasted. These aren't the ornate blends from the deeper palace rooms. These are the foundational leaves. Simple, pure, revered. This was the tea used for the opening brew, the first cup steeped to cleanse the space, calm the participants, and symbolically wash away the chaos of the day. Think of it as the Ottoman version of resetting your Wi-Fi router, except done with elegance and nobody yelling about buffering. The attendant scoops the leaves into a slim-handled spoon carved from bone. She sprinkles them into a waiting pot, and the soft plink of each falling piece echoes as though the palace itself is listening. You get the sense that sound mattered here. Rhythm mattered. Every move had a purpose. Even silence was choreographed. And right when you're admiring the intricacy, a stray thought pops into your mind. Historians still debate whether this first brew was actually consumed or simply offered symbolically to the spirits of the palace. Some insist it was poured into a basin of rose water. Others say it was sipped in absolute silence. A few claim the attendants drank it quickly when no one was looking, because waste not, want not, has been a human philosophy since forever. Honestly, you wouldn't blame them. The attendant pours hot water over the leaves, and steam lifts in a swirling ribbon, fogging the lantern light. You feel it drift toward your face with a soft kiss of heat, carrying the scent of grass after rain. Your shoulders loosen without your permission, like your muscles are receiving instructions directly from the steam. When she stirs the pot with a long-handled spoon, the liquid shifts from pale gold to deeper amber. You notice her gripping the spoon with her fingertips, not her whole hand, as though even the smallest disturbance could ruin the brew. This was the first tea of the evening, the anchor, the baseline. It needed to be flawless. A second attendant enters, carrying a tray of tiny porcelain cups decorated with delicate cobalt lines. They look fragile enough that a strong sneeze might demolish them. She arranges them beside the pot with a symmetry so satisfying you feel a soft tingle in your brain. It's like watching someone perfectly align icons on a desktop, orderly enough to make your inner neat freak hum with joy. The two women exchange quiet glances, the kind that communicate entire paragraphs without words. Years of practice have synced them together like two apps running the same background process. You watch as they lift the pot and pour the first brew into a tall vessel, letting the tea pass through air before hitting the bottom with a soft, satisfying hiss. This airing wasn't for drama, at least not entirely. It helped cool the tea slightly and infused it with breath, a practice said to awaken the leaves spiritually. You lean in, mesmerized. The scent shifts again, rounder, deeper, like the flavor is rewriting itself in real time. The attendants pour small amounts into each porcelain cup, filling them only a third of the way, signaling that this stage was more about appreciation than indulgence. Just a taste. A whisper of possibility. A promise of the ceremonies that would follow. A breeze slips through the lattice window, fluttering the lantern flames. Shadows stretch and dance, and for a moment the whole room seems to sway gently. You step closer, careful not to disturb anything, and you notice something on the far wall, a narrow shelf holding a single wooden tablet. It's old, older than the palace, maybe, etched with faint characters from a script you can't fully read. The edges are worn smooth as if countless palms have touched it over the centuries. This tablet, the attendants believed, carried the blessing of the tea ritual. Some said it had hung behind the first tea master of the palace. Others insisted it was simply a relic someone stuck there because they didn't know where else to store it. Again, historians continue to argue about which interpretation makes sense, mostly in academic journals that no one except 5 experts and one very bored graduate student read. One attendant finishes pouring the tea. The other places the final cup down, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from reverence. This opening brew wasn't for the sultan, for the viziers, or even for visiting ambassadors. This was for the ceremony itself, for the space, for the unseen. She lifts one cup, bows her head, and raises it just above eye level. You feel the air shift. It's subtle but unmistakable, a sensation like the palace taking a long breath in. Then she sets the cup back down with a soft tap. 1 beat. 2 beats. Silence. Then both attendants exhale together, as though releasing the room from its suspended moment. You step back, feeling the warmth in your chest. The ritual wasn't grand, but it carried weight, the way small beginnings often do. Before the palace plunged into politics, before whispered strategies curled into the night, before jeweled cups clinked in enormous halls, there was this. A quiet brew, a gentle reset, a reminder that even empires needed a soft start to the evening. The attendants rise in unison, moving to prepare the next phase of the night. And you follow, drawn by the faint promise of something deeper, richer, waiting just beyond the next door. You trail behind the attendants as they slip through another carved doorway, this one framed with darker wood, its patterns sharper, more angular, like someone wanted this entrance to feel stern. An architectural, wipe your feet before entering moment. The transition is immediate. The air cools, the scent shifts from warm tea steam to something metallic and faintly medicinal. You step into a narrow passage where the walls grow closer together, almost conspiratorial, guiding you toward a place tucked away from the gentler rhythms of the palace. This is the domain of the palace eunuchs, the men who orchestrated order where chaos constantly threatened to spill through the seams. You feel their presence before you see anything, a subtle tension, the kind that makes your spine straighten without you realizing it. The Ottomans trusted these men with the inner workings of the palace, granting them access to knowledge, rooms, and secrets few others ever touched. And tonight, you're heading straight into their workspace, the hidden engine room behind the tea rituals. You hear footsteps ahead, purposeful, steady. A lantern flickers, revealing a tall figure wrapped in dark silk. He moves with the precision of someone who measures his life and protocols. He doesn't look at you, not because you're invisible, but because his attention is locked onto the small chest he carries. The chest is carved from ebony, its hinges wrapped in silver filigree, and even from a distance you sense it's important. Heavy with meaning, heavy with history, heavy with something more literal too, judging by the way his arms flex. You follow him into a chamber lit by only 2 lamps placed high on the walls. Their glow casts elongated shadows on the floor, stretching like quiet guardians across the polished tiles. The room is stark, almost austere, with the exception of a table occupying the center. On it sits an array of tools, tiny sieves, long-handled spoons, heated stones, small mortars carved from marble veined like old paper. Each object is arranged with mathematical precision, the kind that would make any modern-day perfectionist weep with joy or fear. This is where the tea was prepared before being delivered to the more public rooms of the palace. Not brewed. No, that came later. This was preparation, calibration, refinement. The eunuchs controlled this stage, because controlling the ingredients meant controlling the ritual, and controlling the ritual meant controlling access. Power often hides in the smallest details, and the eunuchs knew that better than anyone. The man with the ebony chest sets it on the table, then opens it with a soft click. Inside are compartments lined with velvet, each holding a different tea ingredient: dried citrus peel, shaved cinnamon bark, crushed rose petals, powdered amber resin, slivers of ginger so thin they're nearly translucent. You lean closer and catch hints of the scents: sharp, floral, woody, peppery. These weren't random. These were chosen deliberately, based on the ceremony, the mood of the evening, even the political temperature of the court. And yes, historians still debate whether the eunuchs used certain blends to subtly influence the emotions of whoever drank them. Some believe they manipulated tensions during fragile diplomatic meetings. Others insist tea was simply tea, and any emotional shift came from exhaustion or palace intrigue, not herbs. You're free to choose whichever version you find more entertaining. Personally, the idea of tea-based emotional engineering sounds like a skill we could use at office meetings today. The eunuch lifts a tiny wooden scoop and begins measuring. His movements are slow but firm, as if each gesture carries the weight of tradition. You watch as he adds a pinch of powdered amber to a small bowl, followed by a curl of dried lime rind. Then he hesitates over the ginger, only for a moment, but long enough for you to sense a story there. Maybe ginger was considered bold. Maybe it was used only on nights when the Sultan demanded sharp clarity. Or maybe the supply was running low, and no one wanted to deal with the procurement paperwork. You know how bureaucracy works. He mixes the ingredients with a small pestle, crushing them gently, coaxing them into harmony. The sound is soft, rhythmic, stone against stone, history against time. You feel it vibrate faintly under your feet, a sensation like a heartbeat buried in the floor. Another eunuch enters, this one shorter, older, with a pale scar tracing from his temple to his jaw. He carries a ledger bound in leather, its pages thick and undulating like they've absorbed decades of humid air. He sets it on a side table and flips through it, scanning with rapid, efficient movements. You drift closer and catch glimpses, columns of neat script, ingredient lists, dates, ceremonial codes. This was their record, the internal system that kept the palace functioning. The part no one saw, the machinery beneath the silk. The older eunuch murmurs something to the first, and though you can't hear the words, the tone is unmistakable, advisory, authoritative. He points to a specific line in the ledger, and the younger adjusts his mixture accordingly. A little less amber, a little more rose. You smile a little. Even in the 16th century, there were supervisors checking everyone's work. As the mixture is completed, the younger eunuch pours it carefully into a metal tin etched with geometric designs. He seals the lid with a twist, then uses a thin stick of warm beeswax to secure the seam. The scent of the wax hits your nose, sweet, faintly smoky, and mingles with the sharper aromas of the spices. The room suddenly feels warmer, more intimate. The tin is placed on a wooden tray, and the older eunuch covers it with a cloth embroidered in gold thread. This cloth, you realize, is more than decoration. It signals that the ingredients have been prepared according to palace standards, guarded by protocol. The cloth acts like a signature, a silent stamp of approval. No one else in the palace would dare remove it. The older eunuch turns, walking toward a tall, narrow cabinet in the corner. He opens it to reveal rows of similar tins, each labeled with coded markings. Symbols that look simple, but probably concealed entire stories. You imagine flavors created for celebrations, for mourning, for tense negotiations, for triumphant victories. Every tin held a mood, a chapter, a decision. And suddenly, you notice something odd. The back corner of the cabinet, half hidden behind the more ornate tins, houses a single container that doesn't match. It's plain, wooden, cracked. The marking on it is faded almost beyond recognition. You strain to see it, and then you do. The same looping tulip intertwined with a crescent moon, the same symbol you saw earlier. A forgotten blend, a relic of the earliest palace teas. The older eunuch pauses when his hand passes it. Just a small pause, barely a breath. But the kind that tells you some things survived here not because they were needed, but because they were remembered. He shuts the cabinet gently. The younger eunuch takes the tray with the freshly prepared mixture and heads toward the door that leads deeper into the palace, toward the chambers where the real ceremonies will unfold. And like a quiet shadow, you follow him, ready to slip into the next layer of this unfolding ritual, where incense curls through the air and the palace prepares to reveal secrets wrapped in steam. You follow the younger eunuch as he steps into a wider corridor, the kind that feels more like a river of polished stone than a hallway. The tray he carries doesn't rattle, doesn't sway. He moves with the practiced steadiness of someone who was trained for this exact task since boyhood. You drift behind him, feeling the temperature rise slightly, as though you're walking toward a warm hearth rather than deeper into a palace known for its political draftiness. Ahead, a set of tall arched windows spills moonlight across the floor in long silver stripes. That light feels cool against your skin after the enclosed warmth of the preparation room. The eunuch turns left, passing through a curtained archway made from heavy velvet embroidered with tiny gold beads. When he pushes it aside, a faint chime rings out, tiny bells sewn into the hem, a subtle security system that signaled to anyone inside the room that someone important was entering. The space beyond is unexpectedly airy. You're standing in what was once the palace's spice gallery, though that name is misleading. It wasn't a gallery for public viewing. It was a holding space, half storeroom, half diplomatic gateway, where trade goods were inspected before they were allowed into the palace proper. Shelves line the walls, though many are empty now, their contents moved, forgotten, or absorbed into other rooms over centuries. But tonight, there's something here. Something small but undeniable. A crate sits near the far wall, its lid half open, revealing bundles wrapped in waxed cloth. The eunuch doesn't look at it, but you can't help drifting closer. You lift a corner of the cloth and catch the scent of citrus, sharp, bright, almost electric. These were imports, likely from far beyond Ottoman borders. And this crate represents a different story, one the palace rarely acknowledged out loud. Commerce. The empire's veins weren't made of marble. They were made of trade routes, bustling ports, and caravans that crossed continents with spices, silks, and yes, tea. The Ottomans didn't grow the earliest teas themselves. They imported them, tasted them, experimented, and adapted them. What you're smelling now is a clue to one of those early shipments, preserved here like a forgotten guest at a banquet. Historians still debate whether this exact type of citrus peel came from Venetian merchants or Eastern traders, but you're not here to solve academic arguments. You're here to drift and notice, letting the palace speak at its own pace. The eunuch stops near an inner doorway. This one is smaller, framed in pale wood carved with ocean waves, an odd motif for a palace so far inland, but symbolic. It represented the maritime routes that fed the imperial appetite for exotic goods. When he steps through, you follow into a chamber that feels completely different. Warm, fragrant, alive. This room is where imported leaves and spices were first inspected, not by scribes or traders, but by specialists known as Tadimsalar, the tasters. Men and women who could identify region, harvest season, and quality not just by smell, but by the way the leaves reacted to the air. You imagine them standing at these tables centuries ago, swirling leaves in their palms, sniffing, rejecting, approving. The air still holds echoes of those judgments. On a side table sits a woven basket filled with tea leaves not yet sorted. You run your fingers lightly through them. They're dry, fragile, softer than you expect. Some are curled tightly, others looser, as though different origins were mixed together before the eunuchs separated them. You feel a small thrill of recognition. These leaves predate the refined process you saw earlier. They're raw ingredients, unorganized, full of potential. And then, there it is. A deeper, more resinous scent hidden beneath the layers. You breathe it in again, and it hits you like the warmth of a blanket pulled from a sunlit windowsill. This is the tea that captured the palace's attention long ago, the one that arrived from distant hills carried in cloth sacks on the backs of pack animals that had never heard of an empire. The one that whispered possibilities. And you know, with a quiet certainty, that this is where the obsession began. You hear soft footsteps behind you. A trader appears in the doorway, a ghost of the memory you're drifting through, dressed in simple garments dusted with the remnants of long travel. His face is sunburned, his boots worn, but his eyes gleam with the excitement of someone about to present something rare. A eunuch, older, commanding, approaches him and gestures toward the basket. There's no transaction, no haggling. The trader reaches in, lifts a handful of leaves, and releases them slowly, letting them fall back into the basket like curled feathers. The eunuch watches the cascade, assessing the shape, the aroma, the sound. Yes, the sound. Some tasters claimed they could hear quality in the leaves. Whether that was genuine expertise or palace theatrics, well, historians continue to debate that point too. The eunuch nods once. Approval. The trader bows, relief softening his shoulders. That nod meant payment. It meant favor. It meant his caravan would be welcomed again. It meant the palace kitchens, and eventually the palace tea ceremonies, would adopt this tea into their repertoire. The younger eunuch with the tray steps around the memory, unperturbed. He's focused on his task. He carries the tray through another door, this one carved with interlocking vines and topped by a pointed arch. You follow him into a dim passage lit only by a few small lanterns. The air cools again, but carries the lingering scent of fresh leaves and citrus. You feel it cling to your clothing like traveling perfume. The passage slopes downward, not steeply, but noticeably enough that your footing shifts. The stones beneath you are smoother here, worn by countless feet walking the same path, attendants, tasters, eunuchs, ambassadors sneaking sips of forbidden brews. You imagine the murmur of voices over centuries blending into a soft hum, one that still lingers in the stones if you let yourself listen. And then the passage opens into another room, one smaller but radiant in its simplicity. A single lantern hangs from the ceiling, its frame made from twisting bronze vines. Beneath it sits a long wooden table decorated with a runner woven in deep reds and blues, the empire's colors. The eunuch sets the tray here carefully, the way someone places a fragile relic on an altar. This is the tea assembly station, the final step before the mixture was sent to the brewing chamber. Here, the eunuchs waited for the signal from the women you watched earlier. When the first brew was complete, they would deliver the prepared ingredients needed for the next phase of the ceremony. For now, the room is quiet, but you sense the intensity beneath the stillness. A storm of preparation, of steps rehearsed for decades, of rituals so old that no one remembers their origins, only their functions. You lean your palms on the table, feeling the grain of the wood. A warmth rises from it, not real heat, but the warmth of memory. You feel, for a moment, as though you've stepped into the bloodstream of the palace, where commerce, ritual, politics, and secrecy all converge in the humble form of tea leaves. You straighten, sensing the night shifting around you. Something deeper awaits beyond the next doorway, something steeped in fragrance, shadow, and ceremony. So you follow, quietly, curiously, ready for the palace to open the next chapter in its hidden ritual. You step through the next doorway, and immediately the atmosphere changes, as if the palace has exhaled and decided you've earned a glimpse of something more intimate, more guarded. The corridor curves gently, drawing you deeper, and the faint glow ahead suggests you're approaching a place reserved for the truly powerful. The eunuch you've been following slows his pace, adjusts the cloth draped over the tray, and his posture shifts into something almost reverential. Whoever awaits beyond this corner is not someone he, or anyone, approaches casually. The corridor opens into a rounded chamber bathed in a golden light that seems too warm to come from mere lantern flame. The source sits on a carved pedestal near the far wall, an oil lamp with a glass chimney tinted amber. Its glow makes the room look like it's submerged in honey. Shadows ripple across the walls in gentle, liquid patterns, and for a moment it feels like you're standing inside a giant teacup filled with molten gold. Your eyes drift to the center of the room, where a low table made of ivory inlaid wood rests atop a silk carpet. The patterns on the carpet swirl like clouds drifting across a twilight sky. Cushions surround the table, plush and perfectly spaced. And sitting on the table, shimmering like a tiny star that fell into the palace and decided to stay, is the golden teapot, the one reserved exclusively for the Queen Mother, the Valide Sultan, or on rare nights, for the reigning queen herself. You're not sure what you expected, a shiny pot, maybe, something ornate, something fancy, but this is different. The pot looks almost alive in the golden light. The polished surface reflects the warm glow in a way that makes it look fluid, like the metal might shift if you blink too slowly. Its handle curves elegantly, shaped like a stylized tulip stem. The spout is long and narrow, crafted with such precision that you can imagine tea flowing from it like a thin ribbon of silk. You step closer, feeling the quiet push of history behind your shoulder. This teapot wasn't only a beautiful object, it was a symbol of status, of maternal authority, of the subtle power held by the women who understood court politics better than most generals. A queen in the Ottoman Palace wielded influence not through direct confrontation, but through ritual, through presence, through gestures that echoed far beyond the quiet rooms where they unfolded. The eunuch kneels before the table, setting down the tray with a careful grace that borders on devotion. He lifts the embroidered cloth covering the tin and sets it aside, revealing the blend you watched him prepare earlier. Amber, rose, lime, all crushed into a mixture so fragrant you feel your chest expand with each breath. He opens a smaller box, carved from sandalwood, its interior gleaming from years of oil polish. Inside are delicate tools, a spoon with a carved tulip, a tiny funnel shaped like a seashell, a slender brush for clearing stray leaves. These were the queen's tools. They were handled only by attendants trained specifically for this chamber. The presence of the golden teapot elevated the ritual from practical preparation to something closer to ceremony, a performance meant not for an audience, but for an idea. for continuity, for prestige, for the monarchy's carefully curated aura. You take in the room again and notice something tucked into an alcove near the window. A framed miniature painting, the kind palace artists specialized in. The colors are soft but vivid, depicting a woman in a richly embroidered robe holding a cup of tea. She sits near a fountain, petals drifting on the water's surface. Her expression is serene, almost mischievous, like someone who's been told a particularly juicy rumor but is choosing, wisely, not to share it. Historians still debate whether this miniature actually depicts the Valide Sultan or was simply an idealized portrait of feminine authority. Some argue the facial features match known descriptions. Others insist it's symbolic. Either way, the placement here is deliberate, a reminder of who this room belongs to. The eunuch prepares the golden teapot with movements so smooth they seem rehearsed thousands of times. He warms the pot first, swirling hot water inside and pouring it out over a small bowl because heaven forbid the queen's tea meet a cold vessel. Then he adds the tea mixture, each pinch falling with a soft whisper. When he leans forward, you catch a glimpse of the pot's inner surface, reflecting the lantern light like a tiny sun. He pours boiled water over the leaves. Steam curls upward in thin, luminous threads, catching the golden glow and turning it into something ethereal. You inhale deeply, warm citrus, soft rose, the faint bite of ginger. The scent is luxurious, but not overwhelming. Like wearing a perfume made not to announce itself, but to be discovered slowly. The tea begins its first bloom, the leaves unfurling, releasing layers of aroma you couldn't smell before. Each breath reveals new notes, rich earth, the memory of sunlit hillsides, a whisper of resin from the amber powder. You feel the moment settle around you like a weighted blanket. It's comforting, heavy in a good way. The eunuch lifts the pot and pours a small sample into a porcelain cup painted with cobalt waves. He swirls it, watching the color settle into a deep amber that mirrors the lamp's glow. Then he tips the cup slightly, examining the clarity. No particles, no cloudiness. Perfect. He brings the cup close to his nose and inhales. His eyes soften. Approval. And yet, there's a tiny wrinkle between his brows. You lean closer, curious. Could it be? Ah, yes. The ginger. Too much? Too little? You aren't sure. But he adjusts the pot with a precision that tells you even small imbalances mattered in this room. The queen's palate was known to be discerning, sharp enough to notice even subtle shifts. Not because she was picky, but because tea, for her, was more than taste. It was the language of power, of diplomacy, of expectation. You reach for the porcelain cup, instinctively wanting to taste it yourself, but your fingers pass through the air. You're here and not here. Present, but untouched. The palace offers you sights and scents, but not sips, like a strict host who wants to impress you, but also wants to keep you a little hungry. The eunuch places the golden teapot back onto the warmed stone, letting it steep for a precise measure of time. You watch him count quietly, not with numbers, but with breaths. Slow, steady, perfectly timed. This wasn't guesswork. This was mastery passed down through generations, guarded like a treasure. When the steeping is complete, he lifts the lid and stirs the tea gently, the sound barely audible. He pours the finished brew into a second, larger pot made from white ceramic, so translucent it seems almost edible. This step cools the tea slightly and ensures even distribution of the flavor. The golden pot is not for serving, only for brewing. That rule was followed religiously. You feel the room shift around you, the air vibrating with a deeper anticipation. The ceremony is about to move beyond preparation into presentation, into the hands of the queen. You inhale again, savoring the lingering fragrance. It's soft now, more diffused. The steam curls upward in graceful spirals, fading into the room's warm glow like a story slipping into memory. And you follow the eunuch as he lifts the final serving pot, preparing to deliver the tea to its destined recipient, unaware that you're drifting just behind him, ready to slip into the next, more delicate layer of this unfolding ritual. You move with the eunuch as he exits the queen's chamber, carrying the ceramic serving pot with both hands, his elbows tucked close to his sides. The hallway beyond is much quieter now, as if the palace itself is holding its breath. You feel the stillness wrap around you like a velvet cloak, heavy and warm, muffling every sound except the soft scrape of the eunuch's slippers against the floor. He heads toward a wing you haven't seen yet, one lit by a warm orange glow that pulses faintly, like slow breathing. The scent changes too. Gone is the sharp citrus or the floral bloom of rose. This scent is deeper, earthier, tinged with smoke and something sweet that feels almost edible but isn't. It reminds you of the kind of incense people burn when they want to appear mysterious, even if all they're really doing is trying to impress their dinner guests. You step through a tall archway into a chamber far more atmospheric than the ones before. The room is wide and low, its ceiling lined with beams painted in dark blue, tiny gold stars dotting the wood. Lanterns hang from long cords, swaying gently as though stirred by an unseen breeze. The walls are lined with niches, each holding jars, spices, small bundles wrapped in cloth, and bowls filled with resins that glimmer like crystallized honey. This, the eunuchs called it the perfumer's hall, is where the palace's scent artisans worked. And tonight, it's where they build the aroma that pairs with the queen's tea ceremony. Yes, paired. Because in the Ottoman Palace, tea wasn't merely steeped. It was staged, like a performance composed of flavor, fragrance, lighting, and even sound. If you've ever walked into a fancy spa and thought, wow, this place smells expensive, then congratulations, you already understand the principle. Except here, the goal wasn't just relaxation. It was enchantment, seduction, influence, a subtle shaping of the atmosphere around the sultan and those he allowed near him. You hear a soft hum from the far corner. 3 women seated cross-legged around a low bronze brazier. One of them, an older woman with silver threaded through her dark hair, grinds spices with a stone mortar. The rhythmic motion echoes faintly, like a heartbeat softened by velvet. Another woman sorts dried flowers into small ceramic dishes. Lavender, chamomile, hyacinth, each one pale and fragile as if touched by moonlight. The third tends to the brazier, adjusting small charcoal pieces until they glow crimson. A eunuch, not the one carrying the tea, approaches them. He bows slightly, and the older woman looks up, meeting his gaze with a confidence that radiates authority. She gestures toward a wooden box, which he retrieves carefully, offering it to her like a sacred relic. She opens the box, revealing vials filled with powdered spices and aromatic resins. Her fingers hover over them with the deliberation of someone choosing notes for a symphony. You watch her select a pinch of saffron, then a pinch of powdered myrrh, then something dark you can't identify. The combination looks improbable, like ingredients for 3 completely different recipes. But when she drops them into the small cup atop the brazier, a soft plume of smoke rises, and the scent hits you immediately. Warm, sweet, slightly bitter. A complexity that unfolds layers with every breath. You close your eyes and feel it drift through your senses, comforting but edged with something ancient, like the memory of a story you can't quite place. She adds crushed hyacinth petals, and suddenly the fragrance lightens, blooming outward in a soft burst. Even the lantern light seems to shimmer differently. You quickly realize this isn't just incense. This is part of an orchestrated design, a sensory architecture. The perfume mistress reaches for another tiny jar, this one containing amber resin, solid, golden, precious. She shaves off a thin curl with a silver blade, and when she drops it onto the heat, the resin melts into a rich, buttery smoke that fills the room with warmth. The scent settles over your shoulders like a shawl woven from light. You exhale, and the fragrance seems to settle deeper, not just around you, but inside you. You feel your muscles loosen, your hands steady, your breath slow. You're not imagining it. These scents were crafted intentionally to influence mood, to temper anxiety, to soften thoughts like dough before it's shaped. And yes, historians still debate whether certain resins were chosen specifically to calm political tensions during important palace meetings. Some argue the recipes were symbolic. Others insist they were strict psychological tools. A few claim the entire tradition was an accident sparked by one overly enthusiastic perfumer centuries ago who used too many petals and too little restraint. You inhale again. Whatever the origin, the effect is undeniable. The room feels like a safe pocket of the universe, cushioned by fragrance and flame. The younger eunuch, the one carrying the tea, steps closer to the perfumers. They look up as he kneels and places the serving pot on a waiting cloth. This act marks the synchronization of the ceremony's two sensory halves, the flavor and the scent. The older perfumer inspects the pot, nodding at its shape, its temperature. She lifts the lid, letting the aroma escape for a moment, and closes her eyes. Her reaction is subtle, just a slight shift of her shoulders, a small exhale, but you feel its meaning. Approval. Harmony. The tea and the incense complement each other tonight. No additions needed. No final adjustments. She speaks a soft instruction, and the women around her begin collecting small carved boxes containing scent beads, tiny spheres of dried floral oils and powdered spices. These will be placed around the queen's chamber to diffuse the softer notes of the fragrance. They gather velvet pouches, silver tongs, and thin strips of sandalwood to place beside the burning resin for an afterscent that lingers long after the ceremony ends. The younger eunuch watches, poised and silent. He knows his next task isn't just delivery. It's timing. He must arrive exactly when the queen enters her seating alcove. No earlier, no later. Perfection mattered because ritual wasn't just ritual in the Ottoman Palace. Ritual was politics draped in silk. You wander toward one of the shelves. A small jar catches your eye, dark glass, sealed with beeswax. A faded label written in delicate calligraphy. You touch it lightly, and a whisper of scent escapes. Dried jasmine mixed with something sharper, maybe clove. This blend smells ancient. Secretive. You feel like you're getting away with something just by noticing it. And then, without warning, a memory flickers through the room, as though the walls themselves exhale a forgotten story. A young perfumer, centuries ago, kneels over her brazier. She adds too much frankincense. The smoke blooms thick, startling the attendants. The queen herself appears at the doorway, concerned, and then amused. She waves the air, laughing softly. The perfumer blushes. And somehow, that night, the blend becomes a new standard, codified, beloved. But was it frankincense? Or amber? Or sandalwood? Historians still argue about the specifics, citing inconsistent journals, contradictory palace records, and fragments of oral tradition. You smile, because sometimes the uncertainty is sweeter than the truth. Back in the present, the eunuch lifts the serving pot and bows to the perfumers. The older woman gives a small nod. The ritual has been approved. The scent is ready. The tea is ready. The queen is waiting. You feel the palace shift around you again as the eunuch exits the perfumer's hall. A transition in the night. A tightening of focus. A deepening of purpose. You follow him into a narrower corridor scented with lingering amber smoke, aware that the ceremony is moving closer to its heart, where the sultan, the queen, and the quiet power of the palace converge under the soft glow of candlelight. And something tells you, the next chamber holds secrets more potent than any spice. You trail close behind the eunuch as he leaves the perfumer's hall, the warm amber haze thinning gradually until it dissolves into the cooler air of the connecting corridor. The serving pot rests in his hands like a fragile piece of the moon, gently glowing, impossibly important. His footsteps slow, as though the palace itself requires caution now. And maybe it does, because ahead lies a room that wasn't built for display, or beauty, or even comfort. It was built for purpose, wrapped in secrecy, functioning quietly beneath the grand machinery of the empire. This is the room where the sultan drinks his tea at night, not the public room where he entertains ambassadors, nor the garden pavilion where he oversees poetry readings. This is the private chamber, small, dim, guarded not by soldiers, but by tradition itself. You sense the shift before you even reach the doorway. The air thickens. The shadows deepen. Your breathing slows without you meaning to slow it. The eunuch steps through a narrow arch framed in dark cedar wood. You follow, and suddenly the space expands just enough to remind you that intimacy can feel grand when the moment demands it. The room is dim, but not dreary. A cluster of candles burns in a corner, their flames mirrored in polished brass trays laid out on a long, low table. Cushions line the walls, arranged with that obsessive symmetry the palace seems addicted to. A silk curtain hangs across the far side of the chamber, concealing the sultan's private alcove. You hear nothing behind it. No breathing, no shifting fabric, but you know he's there, or will be there soon. The eunuch kneels on a cushion near the table. He sets down the serving pot with reverence and adjusts a small cloth beneath it, smoothing the corners until they rest perfectly straight. He reaches for a second pot, smaller, made of dark, heat-blackened clay, and places it beside the first. These two pots form the heart of the ritual tonight, one for pouring, one for tempering. A duet of heat and coolness, steam and silence. You move closer and feel the warmth radiating from the ceramic. It sinks gently into your palms, like holding a cup of tea on a winter morning. The scent is softer now, no longer sharp or floral but mellow, rounded, as though the tea is settling into its final character. A side door opens without sound. Another eunuch slips inside, older, with a posture far too straight for someone who's probably been awake since before dawn. He carries a wooden box, long and narrow, lacquered black and decorated with mother-of-pearl stars. When he kneels and opens it, you see 6 tiny cups nestled in silk, each cup slender and pale, thin enough that candlelight passes through the porcelain like ghostly illumination. These are the Sultan's private cups. Unlike the Queen's ornate wares, these are understated, almost plain, but impossibly refined. You brush your fingertip along one, feeling nothing but air. Your touch slips through it, but your mind registers its presence just the same. If you were actually holding it, you'd probably need 2 hands and a prayer. The older eunuch inspects the cups for imperfections. It's ceremonial, but also practical. A chip in the rim could insult a visiting official. A hairline crack could burn the Sultan's fingers. There's power in small details, and tonight is no exception. He nods once. Everything is ready. Then a hush falls over the room. Not silence, but a deeper kind of quiet, thick and anticipatory. Like the moment right before an orchestra begins, when everyone has their instruments raised, breathing as one. The curtain shifts. You don't see the Sultan, not directly. Only a faint movement, the shadow of fabric brushing across fabric. But the presence behind the curtain is unmistakable. Heavy, intentional, silent, but aware. There's something oddly comforting about the lack of spectacle. No trumpets, no grand announcement. Just a simple acknowledgement that the ceremony is beginning, as it always has, as it always will. You can almost imagine the countless nights that have unfolded here. Quiet plans drafted in steam, political strategies softened by the calming scents of the perfumers, private confessions carried in whispers thicker than the incense smoke. And the tea, this tea, is the catalyst. The younger eunuch lifts the serving pot, tilts it slightly, and pours into the tempering pot. The stream of tea is thin and shimmering, catching the candlelight like a ribbon of melted amber. The first cup is never poured directly for the Sultan. That would be too sharp, too hot, too imbalanced. Instead, it's cooled, harmonized, coaxed into perfection through a series of practiced transfers between pots. Back and forth, back and forth. You watch the movement hypnotically, the tea flowing in soft arcs that seem to paint the air. The eunuch handles the pots like extensions of his own breath, fluid, patient, reverent. When he stops, the tea is ready. One of the cups is lifted, filled, approached toward the curtain by the older eunuch whose steps are so soft they feel imagined. He extends his arm beneath the curtain, offering the cup just far enough for a hand to receive it, but not too far. Ritual has boundaries. Power has etiquette. You don't see the hand, only the faint shift of shadow. But you hear the soft clink of porcelain resting against something solid. A one-note percussion that somehow echoes deeper than any drum. This is the tea the Sultan drinks after night councils, after signing decrees, after considering matters of war or marriage or taxation or diplomacy. This tea, this warm, fragrant, painstakingly prepared brew, ushers him out of political frenzy and into stillness. It is the palace's reset button, the empire's quiet breath. Sometimes, ambassadors were allowed to join him. Sometimes, trusted advisors. And sometimes, on rare, unpredictable nights, an unexpected guest. One story claims that a visiting prince once disguised himself as an attendant, slipping into the room to observe the ritual. Another story says he was immediately caught and politely escorted out with a cup of weaker tea as consolation. Predictably, historians still argue about whether this infiltration ever truly happened. You smile, because in a palace full of secrets, every myth feels like it might be true. The eunuchs continue their silent choreography, pouring, tempering, refilling the cups. each pour punctuated by small motions, deliberate pauses, stolen glances toward the curtain. The Sultan says nothing, but his silence fills the room like snowfall, soft, steady, impossible to ignore. You drift toward one of the walls, noticing carvings hidden beneath the shadows. Tulip patterns, stylized leaves, curling vines. The motifs repeat across the palace like a visual language. You touch one lightly, feeling the grooves like faint whisper lines beneath your fingertips. This room holds decades of nights exactly like this one, and each night holds its own story, hidden behind a veil of steam and soft candlelight. The younger eunuch pours another cup, and a faint breeze slips through the corridor behind you. The candles flicker. Shadows dance across the golden brass trays, turning them into shifting constellations. You get the sense that the palace is leaning in, listening, waiting for the next sip, the next breath, the next quiet decision that shapes destinies subtly, silently. The eunuch finishes pouring, and the air grows still once more. The curtain trembles slightly. Another unseen gesture. Another signal in the language of ritual. You feel the moment tighten around you, like the palace is holding a particularly delicate secret just behind your shoulder. And as the steam rises in slow spirals toward the ceiling, you realize the night is far from over. There's more waiting for you, beyond the chamber's hush, past the next corridor. Stories carried in lost scrolls and unsolved mysteries, just beginning to stir. You leave the Sultan's quiet chamber like someone stepping out of a dream that hasn't finished telling its story. The corridor outside feels a little cooler, a little emptier, as though the palace has gently closed a curtain behind you. The eunuch you've been following moves silently ahead, but now his pace is slower, more reflective. He isn't carrying the pot anymore. The ritual has passed from his hands to others, and without that responsibility, his shoulders seem lighter. Or maybe that's just the way the palace shifts its weight after a ceremony concludes. You drift beside him, feeling the hum of candlelit stillness fade as you approach a different wing of the palace. A wing that smells faintly of ink, dust, and something else. Something old enough that your mind can't label it immediately. The scent of age itself, perhaps, paper absorbing centuries the way cotton absorbs rain. The eunuch turns into a narrow stairwell, descending steps worn smooth by 1,000 feet. Each step creaks slightly, though you suspect the noise is more memory than mechanics. The walls grow tighter, the ceiling lower. You feel like you're walking deeper not just into the palace, but into its mind. At the bottom, a wooden door waits. The eunuch opens it with a soft push, revealing a small chamber lit by a single lantern hanging crookedly from a hook. The room isn't impressive. It looks more like a forgotten pantry than a vault of secrets. Shelves line the walls, some empty, others crowded with scrolls, ledgers, and brittle documents tied with string. This is the archive of things not officially recorded, a place even palace scribes avoided unless instructed, a place for stories the empire wanted to remember privately and forget publicly, a place where the tea rituals had once been described in detail before someone decided they shouldn't be. As you step inside, the air feels thicker, dustier, as if saturated with echoes. You sense that this room holds not only records but regrets. The eunuch walks to a shelf near the back and pulls down a thin ledger, its cover cracked and flaking. He sets it on a low table, brushing away dust with the sleeve of his robe. When he opens it, the pages sigh, an old, papery exhale that hints at both relief and protest. You lean close. The handwriting is delicate, looping, almost hesitant. Notes detailing early tea practices, lists of ingredients, times of steeping, observations about guests. The writer wasn't a scribe. No, their script is too expressive. More like someone writing for themselves, trying to preserve something fragile. A woman's hand, perhaps. Some pages contain drawings, rough sketches of teapots, serving trays, incense burners. Others spill into margins with hurried scrawls, corrections, doubts, warnings. You catch phrases like, must not mix these spices, and only when the moon is thin, and her mood affected the brew. And then you notice it, a section where the ink fades abruptly, like the writer hesitated before continuing. The words become uneven, shakier. You read, tonight, an incident. Unsanctioned. Tea prepared outside formal instruction. A blend unknown to the perfumers. A visitor who was not meant to understand the ceremony. Consequence still unfolding. You feel the air tighten around your ribs. Unsanctioned tea? In this palace? That wasn't just taboo, it was dangerous. Rituals were rigid for a reason. Deviating from them meant risking not only insult but imbalance. Politics here was fragile. Etiquette was strategy. The next line is smudged, ink bled by what looks almost like a drop of water. Or a tear. You lean even closer and make out faint words. It changed him. The Sultan. Subtly at first, then unmistakably. You freeze, sensing the depth beneath this simple sentence. The scent pairing, the brew, the ritual, they weren't just aesthetic. They influenced mood, clarity, perception. Too much rose could soften judgment. Too much amber could darken thoughts. A misplaced herb might energize a negotiation or destabilize it entirely. Historians still debate whether an unauthorized tea blend could truly affect the Sultan, of course. Some roll their eyes and attribute changes to fatigue or illness. Others whisper that the palace tea masters controlled more than anyone realized. And then there are those who believe this ledger is proof of something long misunderstood. Influence wielded not by sorcery, but by sensory geometry, taste, smell, warmth, timing. A symphony subtle enough to sway even a sovereign. The eunuch flips more pages. You see more sketches. Teapots with exaggerated curves that never made it into palace use. Notes on failed experiments. Too bitter, too cloudy. Overpowers incense. Recipes crossed out violently. The handwriting grows jagged, hurried. And then you find it. A drawing of that symbol. The tulip intertwined with the crescent moon. The one you saw on the forgotten jar in the preparation chamber. Beneath it, a note so faint you almost miss it, blend withdrawn. Effects unpredictable. Do not serve without sanction. A chill runs down your spine, though the room is warm from the lantern's glow. Effects unpredictable. In a palace where predictability was the backbone of survival, that phrase rings like a warning bell. The eunuch's fingers rest on the page. His expression doesn't change, but there's something reverent in the way he touches the faded ink. As if he's acknowledging someone whose name has been lost, but whose impact lingers in the palace walls. He closes the ledger gently and replaces it on the shelf. You wander to another corner, where a large scroll rests half unfurled on a table. You tilt your head. Its script is messier, angrier. You see blotches, crossed out lines, scribbles. A frustrated hand. Someone documenting a scandal. You piece together fragments. The night of the misbrewed tea. Voices raised in the council. Accusations thrown like daggers. The Valide furious. Ceremony suspended. You blink. Suspended. Meaning, the palace halted the tea ritual. Cut the ceremony entirely. That explains why earlier ledgers from Section 2 faded into absence. The tradition wasn't just forgotten. It was intentionally interrupted. Stopped midstream. Historians still argue over what exactly happened that night. Some claim it was a political betrayal disguised as a serving error. Others believe a foreign guest triggered a cascade of misunderstandings. A few say it was a simple mix-up. Someone grabbed the wrong tin in the dim light, and the resulting brew sent the council spiraling into chaos. But the ledger here suggests something more subtle, more internal, more delicate. A scandal quietly sealed away. You place your hand on the table, feeling the grain of the wood vibrate ever so slightly with the hum of the palace. The air smells of stale parchment and faint jasmine, leftover traces of someone copying records by lamplight long after midnight. The eunuch signals softly with his hand. It's time to leave. This room isn't meant to be dwelled in. Secrets can be visited, but not inhabited. You step back into the corridor, your head full of half-truths and almost stories, feeling the mystery thicken around you like evening fog. Because now you know something the palace didn't want remembered. The tea ceremonies weren't just delicate rituals. They were power, and someone misused that power once. As the eunuch leads you deeper still, you sense the next chamber will reveal not just practices or tools, but the consequences. The ripples of a forgotten scandal still echoing softly through the palace corridors. You follow the eunuch out of the archive chamber, and the door closes behind you with a softness that feels intentional, like the palace is gently swallowing its own secrets again. The corridor ahead is dim, the lanterns fewer, the air cooler. There's a draft here that carries whispers, literal whispers, soft enough that you can't parse the words, but clear enough that your brain recognizes the cadence of hushed voices. You step carefully, instinctively quieter, as though the stones beneath your feet have entered a more sensitive mood. The eunuch steps slow as you approach a long, curving hallway lined with lattice windows. Beyond them, night stretches across the palace gardens, dark leaves rustling in a wind you can't quite feel. The moon sits low, almost brushing the horizon, illuminating the branches like silver veins. You can imagine the palace's more anxious officials pacing here late at night, whispering into the dark as if hoping the moon would offer strategic advice. Tonight, the whispers aren't coming from outside. They're coming from behind a partially open door ahead, glow spilling across the floor in thin strips. The eunuch pauses just long enough to glance at the doorway, then continues on, signaling by omission that whatever is happening inside is off limits. Naturally, you slip in anyway. The room is small, round, and low-lit, with tapestries lining the walls to soak up sound. It feels like stepping into a pocket of secrecy, a chamber designed not for comfort, but for containment. In the center sits a round wooden table, the grain hidden beneath maps, scrolls, and small carved figurines representing forts and ships. Around the table, 4 men sit close together, leaning in, their voices just above a whisper. You recognize the type immediately. Advisors, ministers, men who spent their days bowing in marble halls and their nights trying not to get executed for bowing incorrectly. Tonight, they're drinking tea. Not the ceremonial tea of the Sultan's private chamber. Not the perfumed blend of the Queen's ritual. Not even the basic tea served at morning councils. This tea is different. Darker. Sharper. Its steam curls upward from a battered iron pot sitting precariously atop a brass warmer. One of the men grips his cup tightly, knuckles pale. Another shuffles papers, eyes shifting toward the door every few seconds. A third scratches nervously at his beard. You'd stroll past them at a modern cafe and think, wow, that group is stress-drinking caffeine like their lives depend on it. And honestly, they kind of do. You drift closer, letting their murmurs brush against you like threads. The Ms. Brood blend, still repercussions in the council. The Valide is furious. We cannot allow this version to resurface. Your pulse quickens just slightly. They're talking about the scandal, the one hinted at in the dust-covered ledgers. The tea blend with the crescent tulip emblem. The mixture suspected of unbalancing something in the palace. You lean in, and a man with heavy brows speaks in a tone so low it nearly disappears. It softened his judgment. He agreed too easily, too quickly. The others stiffen. You feel a flicker of tension spark in the room, like heat rising from a tightly lidded pot. Not anger exactly. Fear. That dangerous, brittle kind. A younger advisor, nervous, with fingers tapping on the table, whispers. If the foreign delegation realized the effect, they could exploit it. They may already suspect. The oldest among them, wearing robes dyed a color only trusted officials could wear, leans back slowly. His eyes track the steam rising from the pot. We were lucky the Valide intervened. The ceremony was suspended before anyone else noticed. A pause. Steam curls. The lantern flickers. Then he adds, but the blend still exists. That sentence sits in the room like a stone dropped into still water. A moment passes. Then another. Finally, one of the men, thin, hawk-nosed, says, we should destroy the remaining stores. All of them. Leave no trace. But the eldest advisor shakes his head. Too risky. If the Sultan discovers we meddled with the archives, we'd all be dead by sunrise. He leans forward, eyes sharp in the candlelight. No, we hide them deeply, and we ensure no one prepares that mixture again. Historians still debate the truth of this conversation, of course. Records mention nothing explicit. Some believe the scandal was exaggerated by later storytellers. Others think the tea blend had no real effect at all, and the council members simply used it as an excuse for their own embarrassing political decisions. But listening now, in this dim little room, you sense something else. Fear born not from superstition, but from experience. These were men who dealt in subtle powers. They knew a dangerous tool when they tasted one. The hawk-nosed advisor picks up his cup, takes a shaky sip, and mutters, to think, a drink meant for harmony could be turned into a weapon. The older man's mouth hardens. Everything in this palace is a weapon, he says. music, incense, words. Then his gaze slides to the iron teapot. And now tea. You feel the room tighten around that single word, like fabric pulled taut. Then, from the shadows, another voice enters the conversation, a soft, clipped tone that makes the men jolt. "You're speaking too loudly," the newcomer says. You turn, and a eunuch stands in the doorway, his expression calm and unreadable. Not the one you've followed, but another, older, more austere, with eyes that seem to see all the way to the bottom of your thoughts. He steps closer, hands folded into his sleeves. "If you fear the blend, lock it away. Not in the archives. Not in the kitchens. Hide it where only the palace walls themselves remember." There is something chilling in the way he says it. Something that suggests he isn't offering a suggestion, but describing a fate the mixture deserves. The advisors nod, stiffly. The oldest bows his head. It will be done. The eunuch leaves silently, closing the door behind him. You watch as the advisors exchange looks, fear, relief, exhaustion, and begin gathering their scrolls. The iron pot still steams quietly in the middle of the table, forgotten, as though the tea itself is listening. You step back, feeling the weight of what you've heard linger in your chest like warm smoke. The council wasn't merely afraid of scandal. They feared something deeper, something alive in that forbidden blend. Influence, vulnerability, possibility. As you exit the small chamber, the corridor feels different, thicker, more aware. You inhale the cool air, tinged faintly with the scent of old stone and restless politics. Because now you understand. The forgotten tea ceremonies weren't lost because they were unimportant. They were lost because they were too important. And as you follow your unseen path deeper into the palace's heart, you sense that the story of that forbidden blend still lingers, waiting, whispering, steeping in the dark. You follow the corridor as it curves away from the council chamber, and the palace's mood shifts again, subtle but unmistakable. The air grows warmer. The shadows grow softer. The scent of political tension fades like smoke carried off on a breeze. Your steps feel lighter now, as though you're being guided toward a part of the palace that remembers creation more than conflict. You hear something faint ahead, the rhythmic tap of tools, the soft scrape of clay being shaped, the whisper of hands smoothing surfaces. The sound is soothing in a simple, grounded way, far removed from the weighty whispers of advisors plotting over tea. You continue on, and the corridor opens into a sunken passage where warm light spills from low windows. That light flickers gently with the glow of kiln embers. You've entered the Iznik ceramics wing, though no formal sign tells you so. The evidence is everywhere. Shelves stacked with unfinished bowls, trays of pigments, tiles painted with intricate floral motifs drying on wooden racks. The air is thick with mineral dust and damp clay. A sense so earthy and comforting that you feel your breath lengthen without meaning to. This is where the palace's most prized teacups and serving dishes were made. Not in some lavish hall, not by noble hands, but by artisans whose names history often forgets. Tonight, however, the room is alive. A craftsman sits at a potter's wheel, his foot pumping the treadle steadily. A lump of clay spins beneath his hands, rising and narrowing with each precise movement. His fingers glide along the surface, shaping the clay with a confidence that comes only after years, decades, of doing this every single day. His sleeves are rolled up, revealing forearms streaked with slip and glaze, and he hums quietly under his breath. You drift closer, drawn by the simple beauty of the moment. He isn't making a vase, or a bowl, or a plate. No, you recognize the shape almost immediately. A teacup, thin-walled, elegantly curved, widening just slightly at the lip, the ideal shape for the palace blends, allowing aroma to gather without overpowering the drinker. The craftsman sharpens the rim with a wooden tool, smoothing it until the edge is so thin it's nearly translucent. You watch the transformation, mesmerized. He lifts the cup carefully, turning it in the light. You can see the potential already. This simple raw form will soon become something extraordinary. Behind him, other artisans work at long tables. Some paint tiles with cobalt blues and searing reds, the pigments matte and dull now, destined to burst into brilliance once fired. Others mix glazes in large ceramic bowls, stirring ingredients with wooden paddles that make a soft churning sound. One woman carefully applies a tulip motif onto a small dish meant to hold sugar crystals during certain ceremonies. Her brush strokes are delicate, confident, and utterly focused. Every curve of the petal has meaning. Every swirl reflects a tradition so ingrained she doesn't have to think about it. You step closer to the main table where finished teacups dry on linen cloth. Each one is unique, variations in color, curvature, thickness. Some bear floral designs, others geometric patterns. The palace had a preference for vibrant hues, cobalt, turquoise, ruby. The colors feel bold even in their unfinished state. You notice a tray set slightly apart from the others, cups decorated in softer tones, with more intricate patterns. These appear reverential, almost ceremonial. You run your fingers through the air above them, imagining their cool smoothness. A craftsman approaches the tray, wiping his hands on his apron. These are for the Sultan's late-night feasts. He murmurs to another artisan nearby. Special commission, gold detailing around the rim. No flaws. You smile inwardly at the phrase, no flaws. It's spoken with such conviction, as though flaws simply aren't allowed to exist here. And maybe they aren't. Not in this room. Not in this craft. But then the older artisan chuckles softly, tapping one of the cups. Remember the cup that cracked during firing last month? The apprentice nearly fainted. The younger artisan groans. He thought he doomed the empire with one air bubble. You laugh under your breath, softly, silently. It's oddly comforting to know even perfection-driven palace artisans joked about their own anxieties. The older artisan continues shaping another small vessel, his movements slow and deliberate. Historians still debate, he says in a low, conversational tone, whether the Sultan truly noticed the difference between a cup fired in his nick and one made in the palace workshops. He shrugs. But the Valide, she knew. She always knew. You don't doubt it. The Queen Mother, with her golden teapot and discerning palate, likely studied the glaze thickness and curvature with the same scrutiny a modern reviewer uses to judge luxury products. The kiln in the far corner roars softly as a potter opens the door. Heat pours out like a wave, so warm it feels almost like a desert wind brushing your cheek. Inside, rows of newly painted tiles and cups glow red-hot, their colors shifting like molten gemstones. You can see the cobalt beginning to brighten, the coral red deepening into something vibrant and alive. The craftsman watching the kiln murmurs something about timing. Too long, and the glaze bubbles. Too short, and the color remains weak. You realize that what you're seeing isn't merely craft. It's alchemy. Earth turned to art. Clay transformed into vessels worthy of royal ceremonies. You wander toward another table where pigments sit in tiny ceramic bowls. You dip your gaze into them. Dry powders and shades so rich they look unreal. A deep blue like the night sky right before sunrise. A red like a pomegranate seed pressed between fingers. A soft green like spring water reflecting sunlight. A bowl of white pigment catches your attention. It glimmers faintly under the lantern light. The artisan nearby sets down his brush and speaks softly to an apprentice. This white, the rare one, it comes from a mine far east. The journey is hard. Many caravans do not return with it. He dips the brush into the shimmering powder. Too much, and the cup looks flat. Too little, and the design disappears under glaze. You lean in, sensing how carefully the pigment is handled, like a fragile secret. And then you notice something else. Near the edge of the room, resting on a shelf of test pieces, is a small shard of pottery. Broken. Irregular. Its glaze bears the faint imprint of the crescent tulip symbol. You inhale softly. The forbidden blends insignia. Here, on a cup fragment. It must have been part of the original set of ceremonial cups designed for the early tea rituals, the ones abandoned after the scandal. The shard is delicate, faded, as though it's been hiding here for centuries, too insignificant to discard, too meaningful to display. You reach toward it, though your hand passes through its shadow, not the shard itself. But the moment feels heavy, like you've brushed against a memory that doesn't want to stay buried. A young apprentice notices the shard and picks it up, turning it over thoughtfully. Why do we keep this? He asks. The older artisan looks at it, then shrugs with a sad smile. Because sometimes forgetting is easier when you keep one piece hidden, he says. Just one. A reminder not to repeat mistakes. He places the shard back on the shelf, gently. You feel the words settle in your chest. A reminder, a warning, a ghost of a ritual that almost changed the palace forever. As the artisans return to their work, painting, shaping, firing, you step back, watching the atmosphere glow with creativity and quiet diligence. The room feels alive with possibility. And yet, beneath its warmth, a thread of history still hums, connecting the artisans' beautiful creations with the rituals you've witnessed, the scandals you've sensed. You turn toward the doorway, knowing the palace is ready to lead you farther still, toward the moonlit ceremonies, toward rituals tied not just to politics or craft, but to the sky itself. You leave the Iznik workshop with the faint scent of clay still clinging to you, warm and grounding, like a reminder that even the most elaborate ceremonies begin with someone's hands in the earth. The corridor outside feels cooler, though, touched by a sweeping breeze that carries something different, something crisp, almost metallic, edged with night air. You follow that sensation as it pulls you down a quieter passage, one lined with narrow windows that reveal slivers of sky. The moon has risen higher now, not full, not faint, something in between, like a silver coin held between two fingers, half-shadowed. You feel immediately that this matters. The palace responds to the moon the way musicians respond to a conductor. When the moon is heavy, the halls feel softer. When it's thin, the air sharpens. Tonight, the sky has slipped into that rare balance that the Ottomans loved to honor with a ceremony reserved for only a select circle. The Moon Trance Tea Rite. Not an official name, of course. Nothing in the palace with mystique ever had an official name. But that's what attendants whispered to each other for centuries. A ritual held only when the moon sat just right, hovering between fullness and absence, casting light bright enough to follow but dim enough to hide under. A perfect contradiction. You round a corner and step into an open-air pavilion, and the shift is breathtaking. The ceiling vanishes. The archways dissolve into the night. Above you, the sky stretches like black silk dusted with silver stars. The moonlight pours across the courtyard floor, illuminating marble tiles in a patchwork of pale shapes. A fountain ripples in the center, catching moonlight and breaking it into shimmering fragments. The sound of water is soft, rhythmic, hypnotizing. You feel it immediately. Your breath slows, your shoulders drop. The palace's daily tension slides off you like a coat. A semicircle of attendants waits near the fountain, each holding something small, a tray of incense beads, a folded cloth, a lantern pierced with tiny star-shaped holes. Their movements are slower now, gentler than in any previous room, as though the ritual itself demands softness. A eunuch lights a lantern, and patterns of starlight dance across the pavilion floor. Another unrolls a long tapestry that serves as the ceremony's base. The fabric is so finely woven that it moves like liquid when they spread it across the marble. The colors, deep blue, silver gray, muted turquoise, seem to shift with the angle of the moonlight. As they work, a soft breeze drifts through the open arches, lifting the corners of the tapestry like it wants to take flight. From the opposite side of the pavilion, a woman enters, her steps quiet, measured, carrying a small bronze vessel shaped like a crescent moon. The vessel glints as she places it gently at the tapestry's center. Its purpose becomes clear as she opens the lid. It holds moon water, collected earlier at twilight, blessed through reflection alone. You inhale, and the air around you feels cooler, as if the water still holds the evening's fragile chill. The main tea master approaches next, a woman with steady hands and a presence that makes the pavilion's lanterns seem dim by comparison. She wears a robe embroidered with swirling cloud motifs, subtle but unmistakable. She sets a long, narrow tray beside the moon water vessel. On it, a small wooden box, a slender silver spoon, a porcelain pot painted with pale vines, and a bundle of dried herbs tied with silk thread. You drift closer and feel your heartbeat steady as the tea master unties the herbs. The fragrance rises immediately, subtle, cool, edged with something like mint, but not quite. It smells like nighttime distilled into a handful of leaves. The Moonlight Blend, steeped only on nights like this. Used only in ceremonies centered around clarity, philosophy, or emotional release. Never used for politics. Never used for negotiation. And definitely never used when the Sultan wanted to sway an advisor one way or another. This blend was for humanity, reflection, truth spoken softly between breaths. The tea master crushes the herbs lightly between her palms, releasing more scent, floral, grassy, with a faint sweetness like honey lingering in the air. You breathe deeply and feel the night expand inside your chest. She pours the herbs into the porcelain pot, then adds a scoop of powdered bark, pale and delicate. She lifts the moon water vessel and pours a thin stream of water into the pot. The sound is so soft it barely registers. Not a splash, not even a drip, more like a whisper. The steam that rises is thinner than usual, almost translucent. You lean closer and see it shimmer strangely in the moonlight, shifting like threads of silver. The ceremony feels otherworldly, as though you've stepped into a piece of folklore. The attendants kneel in a half circle, holding their lanterns slightly aloft. The star-shaped holes cast patterns across the ground. As the tea steeps, the patterns overlap and merge until the floor looks like a swirling constellation drawn by unseen hands. One attendant hums, a soft, melodic note, barely audible but undeniably rhythmic. The others join in, creating a layered harmony so gentle it feels like part of the night itself. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound settle around you. It vibrates faintly in your ribs, like a lullaby that comes from the bones outward. When you open your eyes, you notice something curious. A scroll lies near the edge of the tapestry, rolled tightly, sealed with a faded silver ribbon. You drift toward it, curiosity pulling you forward. The seal bears a symbol you're seeing for the first time tonight, a star inside a crescent, surrounded by swirling lines. Someone has inked faint words beneath the seal in a language you barely recognize. You lean in. It reads, "Only during the moon's mercy." You feel a small shiver trace your spine. The tea master picks up the porcelain pot and raises it toward the moon as if offering the brew to the sky itself. A symbolic gesture, one believed to invite clarity, reveal sincerity, and dissolve emotional fog. There were stories of old viziers confessing their regrets after taking part in this ceremony, of lovers mending broken trust, of rival generals admitting fear, and afterward, nobody spoke of it again. Historians still debate whether these stories are literal or simply embroidered metaphors about the importance of vulnerability within the palace walls. You personally suspect a bit of both. The tea master pours the first cup, not into porcelain, not into clay, into a tiny silver bowl. This bowl is passed hand to hand through the attendants, each of them lifting it to their lips and inhaling, not drinking. This ceremony wasn't about consumption. It was about receiving the fragrance, letting the moon-steeped scent connect breath to breath across the circle. You inhale when the bowl passes near you, even though you can't touch it. The scent hits gently, like cool night air sliding into your lungs. It brings with it a strange sensation, calm, clarity, a steadiness that feels like the emotional equivalent of a perfectly tuned string. One attendant whispers, "It smells like the nights of my childhood." Another murmurs, "It smells like the first time I felt brave." Their voices blend with the hum of distant crickets outside the pavilion. The tea master lifts the pot again and begins pouring into porcelain cups this time. But the cups are placed on the tapestry, not handed to anyone. They sit in a pattern, forming a circle around the moon water vessel. The liquid inside them glows faintly, not a bright glow, but a gentle radiance, as though reflecting the moonlight with devotion rather than defiance. This arrangement symbolizes openness, honesty, the willingness to sit with one's own thoughts. The master sits cross-legged before the circle of cups, motioning for the attendants to join her. They settle quietly, the lanterns dimming slightly as the breeze shifts. For a long moment, nothing happens. Nobody drinks. Nobody speaks. Nobody moves. It's just breath, warmth, moonlight, scent, stillness. You feel your own thoughts ease, your internal chatter softening like mist dissolving at dawn. It's strangely emotional. You weren't expecting a tea ceremony designed centuries ago to reach across time and settle into your ribs, but here you are. One attendant finally whispers, a voice low and steady, "Let the moon take what we no longer need." The others repeat softly, "What we no longer need." The tea master exhales, long and slow. The cups sit untouched. Because tonight's ceremony isn't about tasting the tea. It's about letting the tea steep into you, and letting the moon decide what loosens, what clarifies, what fades. The breeze brushes the tapestry, making the silver threads shimmer like ripples. And you feel the palace preparing to guide you even deeper into rituals that don't just honor the night, but shape the people who live in it. You leave the moonlit pavilion with the faint hum of its chants still echoing inside your chest. The night air clings to you, cool, fragrant, threaded with the softness of the ceremony you've just witnessed. But as you step back into the enclosed hallways of the palace, you feel something else stirring. A shift, a pull. As if the palace has decided you're ready to meet someone who stands at the very core of these rituals. The corridors ahead grow narrower, more intimate, the lanterns dimmer. The marble gives way to worn stone, smoothed by centuries of quiet footsteps. Each step you take feels like descending deeper into the palace's subconscious, into the rooms where meaning is shaped long before anyone sees its outcome. You follow the faint sound of scraping, metal against clay, wood against stone. Small sounds, delicate sounds, intentional sounds. A door ahead is slightly ajar. The warm, soft glow inside spills out like honey, and as you nudge it open with a whisper of motion, you find yourself stepping into a room unlike any other you've seen so far. Not grand, not ornate, not ceremonial. This room is personal, and at its center stands the last true royal tea master of the Ottoman Palace. He is older than you expected, not frail, but weathered in the way people become when they've lived a life of meticulous care. His posture is straight, his hands steady, and his gaze alert. His robe is simple, dyed in muted tones, but the belt at his waist carries small tools, spoons, sieves, tiny brushes, and a thin metal rod for stirring the leaves without bruising them. He doesn't look up when you enter. Not because he doesn't hear you, he absolutely does, but because his focus is fully held by the task before him, preparing tonight's royal blend. He moves with the calm of someone who has spent a lifetime shaping moments that matter. His hands don't tremble, his eyes don't dart. Every motion he makes is polished smooth by decades of repetition. You drift closer. On the table before him sits an assortment of jars, glass, clay, metal, each holding teas and herbs from different regions of the empire and beyond. Some leaves are dark as midnight, others pale as sage. Some are crushed finely, others remain curled, whole, like tiny resting spirals. You watch as he selects each ingredient with a precision that borders on artistry. A pinch of dried rose blossoms, a small measure of fragrant black tea, a shaving of ginger root, thin as translucent parchment, a few flecks of dried orange rind. He doesn't combine them immediately. Instead, he places each ingredient in its own small dish, arranging them like pieces of a mosaic. He pauses between every choice, not hesitating, but listening, as though each ingredient whispers whether or not it belongs. You breathe in the aroma, each scent distinct, yet somehow connected by a thread you can't quite describe. The tea master finally speaks, his voice low and gentle. Tea is not the drink, he says quietly. Tea is the moment it creates. You feel the words settle into you like warmth sinking into your bones. He picks up the rose petals and begins crushing them between his fingers. The sound is soft, almost like paper folding. As the petals break, their fragrance blooms sharper, sweeter, warmer. He adds them to a shallow bowl. He speaks again, not to you, exactly, but to the room, to the memory of the palace, to anyone who has ever tried to understand a ritual without reducing it to mere function. People think I control the tea, he murmurs. But the tea controls me. It tells me what balance it wants, what night it needs, what mood it means to bring. He selects the black tea next, swirling it gently in his palm. The leaves make a faint rustling sound, like wind brushing through dry grass. This batch, he continues, was harvested on a morning fog moved over the hills. You can taste the quiet of that fog if you sit long enough. He smiles faintly, the kind of smile people wear when they know things most others never realize. You watch as he mixes the ingredients with a long-handled silver spoon, drawing slow circles that blend the colors like pigments merging on a painter's palette. He does it with a reverence that tells you this isn't just preparation. It's memory weaving, emotion crafting, a kind of spiritual carpentry. He reaches for a clay pot, old, cracked in places, repaired with gold lacquer in the art of kintsugi, the practice of honoring a vessel's history by highlighting its breaks. He places the mixture inside gently, as though setting something precious in a cradle. This pot belonged to my teacher, he says softly, and to his teacher before him, and, he pauses, to hers before that. You freeze a little at the pronoun shift. Hers. He notices your attention, not visually, but energetically, and continues. The first tea masters were women, he says. Before the palace made it a guarded position. Before the politics. Before. He waves a hand vaguely. All this. You feel surprise bloom inside you. Not because it's unbelievable, but because it makes perfect sense. The patience, the intuition, the sensitivity to the subtle. These roots stretch far beyond protocol. He pours hot water from a kettle into the pot. Steam rises in a soft plume, carrying warmth and fragrance into the air. As the leaves swirl, you watch them begin to unfurl, waking slowly, releasing secrets one layer at a time. As the steam wraps around you, the tea master's expression turns distant, nostalgic. There's a tenderness there, the kind that comes only from remembering things that matter. You know, he says quietly, historians still debate whether our craft ever influenced decisions of the throne. He chuckles softly, without looking up. They write pages and pages, wondering if tea has ever changed a mind. He taps his temple lightly, but the mind changes with breath, with scent, with warmth, with a single moment of stillness. He lifts the pot, swirls it gently, and pours a small sample into a porcelain-tasting cup. He inhales deeply. His eyes soften. This is the brew the palace needs tonight, he decides. Not to convince, not to calm, but to remember. You feel those words settle into the room like a truth spoken aloud after decades of being kept quiet. He sets the tasting cup aside and begins preparing the final serving pot, a vessel shaped like a lotus, pale as moonlight, with silver lining the rim. He wipes it with a cloth dipped in lightly scented water, ensuring the surface is clean, not just physically, but spiritually. When the tea is ready, he pours it with the grace of someone pouring sunlight into a vessel. You inhale. The aroma is warm, gentle, layered, a blend that carries not only flavor, but history, repetition, devotion, love. The tea master covers the pot and sets it on a small tray trimmed in gold, then finally turns toward the door where the eunuch waits. You'll take it from here, he says. The eunuch bows deeply and collects the tray. As he exits, the tea master rests his palms on the table, exhaling with a tired fondness. He looks around his quiet room. The jars, the tools, the old scrolls, the patched pot, the soft lantern glow. This practice is fading, he whispers. And I am the last who remembers all its versions. You feel something ache in your chest, not sadness exactly, but a kind of reverence for a tradition always meant to be tasted, not archived. He turns slightly toward where you stand, as though he senses you even if his eyes never land on you. Come, he says with a gentle smile. There's still more the palace wants you to see. And with that, you step back into the hallway, leaving behind the last master, a guardian of flavors, feelings, and forgotten stories. Because the palace still has more to unveil. And the next chamber is where emotions ferment, alliances tremble, and the soft stir of jealousy shapes the night's tea. You step out of the tea master's sanctuary and back into the hallway, but something in the air has changed. The scent is different now, lighter, sweeter, tinged with something floral, and just a bit sharp, like perfume on the verge of being too bold. You follow it instinctively, like a thread winding through the palace's interior. The corridor widens, sunlight like lanterns flicker to life, and the marble under your feet takes on a rosier hue. You're entering the harem wing. Not in the salacious, sensationalized way storytellers love to exaggerate, but in the real way, the quiet, intimate, beautifully structured world where the palace's women lived, learned, and sometimes ruled more effectively than the men who officially held power. Here, conversations weren't written down. Here, alliances formed over embroidery and tea. Here, the smallest gesture could carry the weight of dynasties. And tonight, the scent drifting from ahead is unmistakable, jealousy steeped in rosewater. You turn a corner and step into a spacious salon bathed in warm lantern light. Silks and shades of apricot, crimson, and gold drape from carved wooden beams. Cushions line the floor. Perfume burners glow in the corners. And in the center of the room, 3 women sit around a low table, each with a porcelain cup in hand. Their expressions are polite. Too polite. You feel the tension before you understand it. This isn't just a social gathering. This is a battlefield disguised as a relaxation hour. One woman sits slightly elevated, her robe shimmering like liquid bronze. Her hair is braided intricately, woven with small pearls. She's poised, elegant, and impossibly composed. This is Hurrem, one of the favored consorts. Her presence radiates calm confidence, but her eyes are sharp, calculating. Across from her sits Safi, a woman whose silver-threaded robe and sapphire earrings declare her status loudly. She holds her teacup as if it's a weapon she's learned to wield socially. Her posture is perfect, back straight, chin high, expression unreadable. The third woman, Mary, rests lower on a cushion, her robe simpler, her hair pinned without jewels. But don't be fooled. Her gaze moves from one consort to another with an alertness that betrays her intelligence. Her simplicity is a strategy. You drift closer, sensing that tonight's tension has a cause. A slender tray sits between them, holding a teapot decorated with vines and blossoms. But when you lean in, you recognize the scent instantly. The tea blend the tea master prepared, the one meant for remembering, reflection, truth, and you suddenly understand the stakes. This tea wasn't meant for political scheming. But inside the harem, anything could become political. The conversation appears casual at first. Hurrem smiles sweetly. The moon was quite beautiful tonight, wasn't it? Safi sips delicately. Beautiful, yes. But perhaps too bright for some. Revealing, even. Mary's fingers tighten slightly on her cup. You feel the tension coil, subtle as embroidery silk. Jealousy swirls in this room like steam, warm, fragrant, deceptively gentle. Hurrem lifts her cup, inhales, then says softly, I heard the Sultan enjoyed his late council tonight. Safi's lips twitch, the smallest betrayal of emotion. And there it is, the inciting ember. The Sultan had spent the evening in council, and someone, according to palace whispers, had sent a private message with the evening tea. A gesture, a suggestion, a quiet attempt to sway his mood. But nobody knows who. And now these three women, rivals, allies, enemies, friends depending on the hour, are trying to deduce whose influence reached the Sultan's private chamber. You lower yourself near the edge of the salon, watching them carefully. Mary breaks the silence first. I'm sure the tea was perfect tonight, she says gently. The master prepared something special. Hurrem's eyes flicker. Safi sets her cup down with a soft click. Special, she repeats. Yes, though some would argue, unnecessary. The room shifts slightly. The silk curtains tremble. Candles flicker. You feel the air tighten around you like the string of a bow pulled slowly, inexorably taut. Hurrem's smile doesn't falter. Unnecessary? Or unwelcome? Mary hides her reaction beautifully. A slight downward glance, barely perceptible. She knows something, or suspects something, or fears something. Safi adjusts her robe with elegant calm. Tea meant for reflection should not have been combined with other messages. Oh, there it is. Someone slipped a message into the tea tray. A folded note, perhaps. A pressed flower. A symbol. A subtle intrusion into the Sultan's quiet ritual. This is the spark of jealousy you've walked into. Quiet, elegant, dangerous. Hurrem tilts her head. And have you heard who dared do such a thing? Safi replies coolly. Rumor says it was someone hopeful. Mary's breathing quickens just enough for you to notice. You watch as Hurrem turns her gaze toward her, not accusatory, but assessing. The tea in Mary's cup trembles. She says nothing. But silence, especially here, is rarely neutral. You drift closer, feeling the tension bloom like a night flower. Then the unexpected happens. A fourth woman enters the room. She moves with ghost-like quiet, a servant carrying a tray of fresh cups. Her eyes are lowered, her posture flawless, but there's something in the angle of her shoulders that suggests she's listening more than serving. She replaces each cup with silent efficiency. Hurrem accepts hers with grace. Safi takes hers without looking up. Mary hesitates, and the servant's gaze catches hers, just for a moment. A flicker, a spark, then the servant bows and leaves. You follow her out with your eyes. Something about her movements feels familiar, measured, practiced, like someone who's delivered messages before. A whisper drifts from the salon as the door falls shut. Safi murmurs, jealousy is such a fragile thing. One drop of tea can shatter it. And Hurrem replies, almost like a purr, or ignite it. You stand in the corridor, feeling the aftershock of what you just witnessed. The tea didn't cause the jealousy, but it certainly gave it a place to gather and simmer. Historians still debate whether the harem's internal politics ever truly influenced royal decisions, or whether the stories were embellished by those who loved intrigue. But if they could see what you just saw, they might reconsider the question entirely. Because tonight, the emotional undercurrents are unmistakable. They pulse through the palace walls. And jealousy, once brewed, has a way of seeping into decisions meant to be rational. You take a slow breath. There is more to see, more threads to follow, more stories unfolding like tea leaves meeting hot water. And the next one waits beyond the palace walls, carried by ships that ride the empire's restless seas. You leave the harem's scented corridors and step into a quieter, darker passage, one where the marble underfoot gives way to wood, and the distant hum of palace life dims into something steadier, deeper. You feel the change immediately, a faint vibration under your steps, subtle but unmistakable, like the heartbeat of something larger than the building itself. You're nearing the docks. The empire wasn't built only on land or palace intrigue. It breathed through its ships, sleek vessels that sliced across the Bosphorus, carrying spices, silks, messages, rumors, secrets, and sometimes tea. Not just any tea. Not just the precious leaves guarded inside the palace, but ceremonial blends prepared by royal command and sent out, across water, across borders, across rival territories. Some shipments were official, some less so. You follow the corridor until it opens onto a balcony overlooking the palace harbor, and the night air hits you with a sudden coolness that smells of brine, tar, rope, wind, and the faint sweetness of distant orchards carried upriver. Lanterns bob gently along the docks, their reflections shimmering like soft gold coins tossed across the waves. Below, you see it, a slender galley painted in deep blue and trimmed with gold, rocking lightly against the pier. Sailors move across the deck like shadows, silent, swift, efficient. They're preparing for departure. The tea masters blend. It's going on this ship. You descend the wooden stairs leading to the pier. The boards creak and sigh beneath your weight, whispering stories of 1,000 departures and 1,000 returns. The closer you get, the louder the ship becomes. Ropes groaning, masts creaking, water slapping the hull in soft, rhythmic beats. A eunuch stands near the gangplank, supervising the loading of several crates marked only with discrete geometric symbols. No names, no destinations. Nothing that could be used as evidence if intercepted. Because this voyage, this isn't a simple trade mission. It's something else. The night air wraps around you as you approach the dock. A sailor lifts one crate, its wood smooth, its hinges reinforced with iron, and carries it up the gangplank. You recognize the emblem burned into its corner, a stylized tulip flanked by wave motifs. Not the forbidden crescent tulip. A newer mark. A safer mark. This crate holds ceremonial supplies for a diplomatic visit. Teacups, incense, a few carefully chosen herbs. Tools used only by the palace's recognized tea attendants. A mobile ritual, a floating extension of the palace. You watch the crate disappear into the ship's belly. The sailors move steadily, each one aware that their cargo is more symbolic than practical. A gift, a gesture, a subtle reminder to foreign dignitaries that diplomacy with the Ottomans was built not only on treaties or weapons, but on rituals as precise as clockwork. As you drift closer, the eunuch supervising the operation murmurs to a nearby officer. "The Sultan sends this with goodwill," he says. "A courtesy for the governor. He admires their customs and wishes to share ours." The officer nods, though the uncertainty in his eyes betrays another truth. Goodwill is rarely just goodwill. You glance at a second crate, smaller, wrapped in thick canvas. No markings, no symbols, no hint of purpose. A sailor picks it up carefully, reverently, as though he knows it holds something valuable. You drift around him and lean close. A faint scent escapes through the slats. A whisper of rose, a breath of citrus, a shadow of amber. Your stomach tightens. It's the same blend you saw earlier. The blend of reflection and memory. A blend meant for clarity, not strategy. But why send it across the sea? You follow the sailor as he loads the crate onto the ship. It disappears into a small cabin, a room reserved not for cargo but for a passenger. Someone important. Someone expected to receive something precise. You feel a presence behind you before you hear it. It's a calculated gift, a voice murmurs. You turn, though turning isn't exactly physical for you, and see an older man in richly embroidered robes standing on the pier. Not a eunuch, not a sailor, a vizier, high-ranking, sharp-eyed. The type of man who could read a room in 3 seconds and recalibrate an empire in 30. He gazes at the ship with a troubled expression. The governor across the water values contemplation, he continues. He seeks wisdom in solitude, not counsels. Perhaps the Sultan believes this blend, he gestures toward the ship, will encourage a favorable mood. You feel the weight in his tone. Perhaps, or perhaps the Sultan wants to test something. Not manipulate, not deceive, but observe. The vizier sighs, his breath fogging in the night air. Historians will argue over these voyages, he says quietly, almost to himself, whether they were gestures of peace or subtle plays for influence. He shakes his head. But I stood here. I watched. I felt the tremor beneath every decision. And you believe him, because behind the docks, past the waves, beyond the horizon, politics blurred into humanity. Leaders found truth in small exchanges. Cups offered, scents shared, silence held gently between strangers. Sometimes that created alliances. Sometimes it soothed old wounds. And sometimes it sparked new tensions entirely. The vizier turns as the ship's bell rings softly. Once, twice. You should go, he murmurs. You have more to see than the sea can show you. Then he steps back into the shadows. The ship begins to move. Slowly, quietly, as if afraid to disturb the water's calm. The lanterns sway. The ropes creak. Sailors call to one another in low voices. The hull parts the dark waves like a knife slicing through velvet. For a moment, you swear the reflection of the moon trembles. And then, something unexpected. A second ship. Small. Sleek. Painted black. No lanterns. No flags. No insignia. It slips from the shadows behind the harbor wall, following the ceremonial ship at a careful distance. You lean forward. A shadow crew. An escort? Or a spy? Nobody on the pier seems surprised. Nobody calls out. Nobody intervenes. Because here, secrets travel with company. You watch both ships drift into the darkness, one glowing softly with ceremonial purpose, the other moving like a silent question mark painted across the waves. The night folds around them. Then the palace calls you back. A soft breeze brushes your cheek. Footsteps echo in a distant hall. Lanterns flicker, urging you onward. There's still one ceremony left. One final ritual. One that took place before everything changed. And the palace is ready to show you how it ended. You return from the docks with the cold night breeze still brushing your skin, carrying the scent of distant waves and the unanswered question of the shadow ship following close behind. The palace corridor that awaits you feels heavier now, quieter, dimmer, as though the walls themselves know you're approaching the final chamber of a long-forgotten ritual. You follow the flicker of small lanterns spaced farther apart than before, each flame shrinking slightly the deeper you step. It's the palace's way of telling you, this is the end of the path. This is where everything once converged. The hallway descends in slow stone steps that echo softly underfoot. Not dramatically, just enough to remind you this place was meant to be walked by few, remembered by fewer, and spoken of only in whispers that dissolve before dawn. At the bottom of the steps, an archway carved with vines and stars yawns open into a broad, circular room lit by only a single brass lantern hanging from a chain. Its glow casts long shadows that swing across the walls like hesitant ghosts. You step inside. The air is still, not stagnant, just deeply quiet, like a room that hasn't been disturbed in years. The ceiling curves like a dome overhead, decorated with fading mosaics of tulips, crescents, and interlocking patterns that once shimmered under candlelight. In the center of the room sits a single low table, its surface smooth with age. A tea tray rests upon it. Empty now, but you can feel the memory of warmth etched into the wood like an old scar. This is it. The final ceremony. The last time the forgotten ritual was ever performed. You don't see the moment yet, but you feel it lingering in the very air. It clings like the scent of incense burned too long ago to identify. You walk to the table and hover your hand over it. A faint warmth stirs against your skin, a ghost of steam, a whisper of heat. The room seems to shift subtly, as though willing itself back into the night it remembers. And then the memory appears, not visually, but through sound. Footsteps, soft voices, the gentle clink of porcelain cups. You turn, and hazy shapes begin to form. Transparent outlines of attendants entering the room carrying trays, candles, bowls of incense. Their movements are slow, careful, almost reverent. The air trembles with anticipation. You see the Sultan enter next, or rather, the echo of him. A tall, commanding figure draped in deep-colored robes, his face softened by the lantern's glow. He takes his place at the low table. Other figures enter as well, advisors, attendants, and one woman whose presence pulls the breath from the room. She moves with controlled grace, her eyes sharp but shadowed. Her robe glimmers faintly, embroidered with silver vines. A consort, perhaps Hiram, perhaps another, but the room does not confirm her name. That remains part of the memory's privacy. The tea master of that era, older than the one you met, but carrying the same quiet certainty, steps forward with a pot painted in soft colors. The tulip and crescent emblem glints faintly on its surface. Not the forbidden blend, but close enough to matter. And suddenly, you feel it. The room tightens. The air warms. The memory deepens. This was the ceremony after the scandal. The attempt to restore balance. The ritual meant to bring clarity, unity, healing. But healing rarely comes easily to palaces. The tea master pours the first cup. Steam rises in slow, spiraling ribbons. The fragrance is warm and floral, but with an unfamiliar edge. The advisors exchange wary glances. The Sultan lifts the cup. He pauses. He inhales deeply. You feel the tension coil. Everything in this room seems to hold its breath. He tastes it, and the moment shatters. Not visibly, not violently, but in the subtle, devastating way a single feather can disrupt a scale perfectly balanced. The Sultan's expression changes, not sharply, but quietly, like a sky clouding over. Confusion flickers across his features. His brow knits. He places the cup down slowly, as if unsure whether to trust his own hand. Whispers stir among the advisors. The consort steps forward, worried, relieved, jealous, protective all at once. Her voice breaks the hush with soft urgency. What did you sense, my Sultan? He doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he stares at the teapot, its paint shimmering faintly in the lantern light. I tasted memory, he whispers finally. But not mine. The room stills. Even the shadows pause. The tea master bows deeply, palms pressed together. My Sultan, the blend was altered, only slightly, after the scandal. To protect you from, he hesitates. From influence. From mistakes. From anything that could shift a ruler's judgment. The Sultan's gaze sharpens. Who decided this change? Silence. The advisors look to one another, but no one speaks. Cowards, you think, but in palaces, silence is often survival. The Sultan rises. His shadow stretches long across the floor. If a ritual can sway the throne, he murmurs, then it is no longer a ritual. He turns to the tea master. End it. The words fall heavy. Absolute. Irreversible. The tea master bows his head, not in obedience, but in grief. A lifetime of knowledge, years of tradition, the whispers of countless nights, all erased in one quiet command. He gently caps the pot, sets it down on the tray, and with hands that tremble imperceptibly, withdraws from the circle. The attendants extinguish the candles one by one. The room grows dimmer, colder, emptier. The ritual ends. Forever. Your chest tightens with the weight of it. Because you've witnessed every step of this journey, the crafts, the scents, the scandals, the moonlit truths, and now you see the moment they all slipped into darkness. Not with fire or fury, but with a single decision made under trembling lantern light. The memory fades. The shadows dissolve. The room returns to stillness. You stand alone, but not entirely, because the palace has given you these stories, not to grieve, but to understand, to carry something the world forgot, to breathe life into rituals left behind. You take one last breath in the quiet chamber, and the scent of vanished tea drifts through you one final time. The palace grows softer around you now, as though the walls themselves know the journey has ended. The lantern light dims, smoothing into a warm haze that blurs the corners of the final chamber. Your breath slows without you thinking about it. Your shoulders ease. Even the echoes of ancient footsteps begin to fade into something steady and soothing. You walk back through the corridors, slowly, calmly, past rooms where incense once curled into the air, where moonlit tapestries shimmered, where artisans shaped fragile cups with steady hands. The details soften, edges blurring like ripples smoothing across still water. The stories you witness trail behind you like gentle threads, each one growing quieter, softer, until they become something like memory rather than image. You feel the palace release you, not sharply, not suddenly, but with the gentlest farewell. A sigh of old stone, a final drift of forgotten fragrance, a warm hush settling over everything. Even the night outside seems to hush itself for you. The breeze that once carried secrets now feels cool and weightless, brushing your cheek with the faintest whisper of rose and amber. Your steps grow slower, then slower still, until you're not sure if you're walking the palace, or drifting through a dream shaped from all the stories it wanted you to hear. And as you breathe in, the images dissolve further. The golden teapot, the moonlit cups, the quiet scandals, the final ceremony. They soften into a warm blur, fading like the last glow of a candle across the floor. You feel calm now, safe, held gently by the fading rhythm of history. Let your breath settle. Let your thoughts loosen. Let the night take over from here. End of script. Sweet dreams.